I came for three reasons tonight. I came to honor Coach Wood, who may be the best ever coach. He's in that group, obviously. I came to honor the Shipley family and Coach Shipley, Glenn West, and the West family because of the ties that they've had with the Woods. And I came to honor your team this year because I saw it come down to a play and I kind of know what that's like. So those are the three reasons that I came. And Bill Little came with me. Bill doesn't like Brownwood much. He said you wear maroon, and he's from Winters. He doesn't like either one of those two for you. So, but Bill's been at the University of Texas 43 years, so let's thank Bill for coming with me tonight. I'm very honored to be here. When you start looking at Coach Wood and his history, and you see 394 wins, I tried to figure out this morning how long I'd have to coach to get that, and I think I'd be 112. And that's if we won 10 games every year. Not many people can say they won nearly 400 games, and not many people can say that they won 7 state championships. When you go back and look at Coach Wood with his smile, his infectious smile, I was fortunate enough to get to know him when I first got to Texas. And you want to stand around guys like Coach Roll, and you want to stand around guys like Coach Wood, and you want to rub up to them, hope some of that stuff will rub off, whatever it is that they've got. Because, as Coach Roll once said, they have it. And I was standing with Coach Roll at practice one day, at spring practice, and a young high school coach came up and said, "Coach, can you tell me if I can make it like you did, like being a head football coach at the University of Texas?" Coach said, "How long you got?" And he said, "Well, just through practice." And he said, "Well, if you've got it, you'll make it. If you don't have it, you won't make it. And if you don't know what it is, you got no chance to make it." Young coach looked at me and I kind of went, He walked off and Coach said, "Hell, he ain't got it." Coach Wood is a guy that went by the rules. He's a guy that really understood that it's not what he knew, but it's what the players had learned. And you that are inducted tonight, congratulations, because you understood what he gave you and what he taught you. And that's so very important as we start looking around. When I go back and think about him coming in my office, he was so proud of his book, and he was so proud of his book signing when he came through. And he sat for hours one afternoon and we talked about football. Most of it was about people. Most of it was about character and integrity and going by the rules. I don't think I've ever heard a guy talk as much about going by the rules as Coach Wood did that day. But it was a fun time for me and a time that I really enjoyed. Kenny Chesney's a country singer. He came to my office last spring and he said, "Coach, we're doing this thing about high school football. It's an album I've got, and I'm going to sell it in the fall, and we'd like for you to be involved with it because you're in the state of Texas where high school football in small towns is so important. You were raised in Cookeville, Tennessee, where football in a small town was really important. And when we started talking about the Brownwoods and the Brenhams and the Salinas and the Cookeville, Tennessees, what you found is there's so much character built in small towns around the sports programs. What you found is that you could rob any store in town on Friday night for an away game because everybody's gone. They were all out of town. And it's important, and I think people check roll at Cookeville, and I'm sure they do at Brownwood to make sure you were there because you had to be there. And if you weren't playing the team, you were a cheerleader, or you worked in the concession stand, or you were a manager, or you were a trainer, you were something. Because you had to be involved in Friday night football because that would pretty much be the determination of the pride that the community had as they went forward. My hometown is so much like Brownwood. My granddad was so much like Coach Wood. My granddad was my best friend. My granddad was the winningest high school football coach in Middle Tennessee history. My granddad has the stadium named after him in Cookeville, Tennessee. We adored my granddad, and like Coach Wood, my granddad never met a man or a lady or an elderly person or a child that he didn't spend time with and he didn't talk to like he was the only person in the room. It was really amazing how special Coach Wood would make you feel and how special my granddad would make people feel. We even have Tennessee Tech compared to Howard Payne. So when you go back and look at the communities, they're very, very similar as you start thinking about what we've got. What my granddad taught me and what I saw and felt from Coach Wood is that you can always smile. You can always reach out to people. If you have a position that people think are important, you can always reach out and sign an autograph or have the gift to have such a great job somebody might want to take a picture with you. And Granddad said, don't you ever walk by anybody without stopping and shaking their hand or smiling or signing something or taking a picture if you're asked. And I could see that in Coach Wood, very, very similar. My granddad also said, make sure you always do what you know to be right. And as I sat there that day with Coach Wood, I actually lost my grandfather 4 months before I came to Texas. And it's one of the reasons I went to Texas, because I know that my granddad's in heaven, and I knew that he would be happy and proud when I was standing there in the office that Coach Royal had. And when I sat there and talked to Coach Wood for 2 or 3 hours that night, I really knew that that's what my granddad would have been like if he was still alive, because I loved him so much and enjoyed being around him so much. So I started doing some research on Coach Wood. First, it made me nervous, as we talked about, when you come back here in 1970 and Coach Roy was a guest speaker, and then he introduced Lyndon Johnson. Well, you're not going to get that tonight. That's pretty good stuff when you go back and look at that long ago. But what I did see is what we've tried to do at Texas. I see a man come in here in the 60s, and I see him reach out to the community, and he made everybody buy in. I've seen that with Coach West at Brenner. I've seen that in a very short time with Coach Shipley here. I saw it at Burnett. And as you start thinking about what they have done what Coach Wood here. He reached out to Stuart Coleman. He reached out to Groner Pitts. He reached out to Cecil Holman. He rallied the teachers. He rallied the whole community. And everybody felt like it was their team. There was ownership with this community in what Brownwood football became. And it's the same today. He reached out to the local media. He got Bill Stovall to buy into it. He reached out to the play-by-play guy. How in the world do you get named Dallas Houston? I mean, is that cool or what? Man, it's really cool. But he got old Dallas buying into him like he is today, and he moved forward. He has a legacy of coaches that he left. Coach Southall. How many assistant coaches are dedicated to a town and a place like Coach Southall and Coach West? I mean, that is really, really good stuff, but you got to love the guy, and you got to love the place to have that kind of loyalty. You got to love the kids, and you've got to reach out to them, and that's what I learned as I started looking through. And that's what you do. In my position as a young coach, you reach out, and you learn about these guys that have been so successful. I've been around Coach Royal like a sponge. I just ask him questions. What was this like? How'd you do this? There's things in history that Coach Royal would say, yes, when President Kennedy got shot in Dallas, I was tying my tie because Vice President Johnson and I were going to meet him at the airport in a couple hours after the parade. Can you imagine sitting there knowing that our president was dead, and the vice president that you were going out to meet the president with is going to be the new president, and you're sitting there. And he talked about the pressures of thinking about, do they go ahead and play the A&M that weekend, the A&M game that weekend or not, because it was so important. So when we got a little bit older in coaching, between my grandfather, people like Coach Wood and people like Coach Royal, and then you get around people like Coach Shipley and Coach West, you start trying to figure out, how are you going to run your program? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be like? And what we do is we try to base our program on number one, good kids. We've had the Colt McCoys and the Jordan Shipleys that in the last few years were on a team that won a national championship, and they were second and third in the country. And they did it the right way. And I'm trying to get the Shipleys to have another son. And now we got Jackson, which will be the next step as we move forward. But what we did, we're in the education business during the week. All of us are, but we're in the show business on the weekend. Kids have to have fun. They have to enjoy it. It's got to be something that fans get captured by. And Texas fans are hard. I mean, they want to see you coached well. They want to see you play hard. They want to see you look good. They want to see you have fun. They want you to excite them. They want to win all the games. When I asked Coach Royal, what do you have to do to be a successful coach at the University of Texas? He said, it's very simple. Reach out to people. He said, the state of Texas had, at that time, 20 million people. And he said, what's happened to the University of Texas, it got very political. And they got splintered. You got the media over here, you got your letterman over here, you got your fan base over here, you got your faculty over here, and nobody's pulling together like one. He said, it's like a box of BBs have been dropped. And Texas scattered all over the room, and you've lost your power. You lost your presence. And he said, what you'll need to do is you'll need to get all those BBs back in the box. And if you can get the BBs back in the box and get it in one heartbeat, you'll have a powerful place again. And that's what we've been able to do. And last year, some of those BBs got out of the box. And we got to get them back in. Got to get them back in. When we were sitting there after that, I said, Coach, tell me what else. What do I have to do if I take this job? He said, well, number one, you have to either like the state of Texas or act like you like it because they like their state. And he said, so do one or the other. He said, number two, you better reach out to the high school coaches. He said, most of the high school coaches are going to be better coaches than you are. And they're going to know everything about your business, and you're going to have to be good to keep their respect. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And he said, then you're going to have to bring the letterman back. Because you lettermen are your history. That's who you are. That's what tonight's about. Tonight's about saying thank you to guys that did wonderful things for this community and gave back. And then he said, oh, don't you ever walk by anybody without stopping to shake their hand or smile or sign an autograph or take a picture, which was exactly what my granddad said when I started coaching college football. And then he said, because it's not about you, it's about the position you hold, and people like their coach at the University of Texas. And they're going to expect you to stand up for what's right, and they're going to expect you to like your job, and they're going to expect you to give them time and attention if they come up. And I said, that's fair. I understand that. And then he said, lastly, and probably most importantly, they're going to want you to win all the games. Which I thought, at that time, he was joking. Now I understand it's true. So what we've tried to do, we've tried to run our business by first being able to communicate with people. Men are hard to communicate with. Coaches are hard to communicate with each other. Teenagers are really hard to communicate with. And when you start looking at it, until we learn to talk, and as older coaches we learn to listen, we've got nothing. We've got nothing. So we start with communication. Secondly, you've got to build up trust and respect after you get communication. Because if you don't trust each other, you don't trust yourself, you don't trust each other, you got nothing. You got nothing. Because you got to have trust. If you don't have respect for yourself, you can't respect other people because you don't know what the word means. And then you better respect your teammates, you better respect your other coaches, you better respect your opponents. You better respect your competition because they'll jump up and bite you about the time you think they can't. But you better have trust and respect. And then lastly, and I learned this in Iraq with our military, it's so powerful, is that you better have a common purpose. And it's really, really hard to get all the people on your team pulling in the same direction. It's really, really hard to get all your coaches pulling in the same direction. It's really hard to get an entire community, like Bob did last year, and like Glenn has done, and like Coach Wood did here. It's really hard to get a whole community pulling for the guys and pulling for what's best for everybody and wanting to win. And in my job, it's really, really hard to get an entire state that's pulling in the same direction, because when we played Ohio State, it was high school football in the state of Texas playing high school football in Ohio. When we played USC, it was high school football in the state of Texas playing high school football in California. When we played Michigan, it was the same. When we played Alabama, it was the same. Because we felt like understanding none of the players that we've gotten, and some great ones in our past from Brownwood, some now and some in the future, none of those guys were ours. They were all raised by you. They were raised by our high school coaches, and they were sent to us simply to borrow. And we wouldn't have college football without having high school football. So in 05, again, we win the national championship. In 08, we're hundredths of a computer point away from playing for a national championship when we lost at Tech in the last seconds. In the Alabama game, with all odds against us, the guys stood up and nearly came back and won it. And that was really, really important to watch them. And I don't think I've ever enjoyed a span of time like I did with Colton Jordan, Quantin Cosby. So much fun because you enjoyed the young people, but you respected them and you liked them. It was so much fun. And time again, I can tell you stories tonight of them on the sidelines and the way they laughed. Honestly, in the Nebraska game, sitting there getting ready for the national championship, because we have to kick the field and go to beat Nebraska. And I also know if we don't make the field goal, I'm probably fired. Because I figured it wasn't good. Some of our fans weren't very happy. And I go out there and I'm thinking about when we beat Michigan with the last second field goal. I walked over to Dusty Mangum, the kicker, and I said, "How lucky are you? You're going to get to kick and win the game. You haven't done anything all night. Your pants aren't even dirty. They're going to be carrying you off, and the only time you'll sweat is when they pick you up. And you're going to get credit for the win. You're going to get you'll have dates. Your life's going to change right now with this kick. So just be happy. Get that smile right before you kick it." So right before the Nebraska kick, and it hadn't been a good night for us. Right before the Nebraska kick, I see Dominican Sue over here, who's whipped everybody we've got on the front line. And then I look back at Hunter Lawrence, our kicker, and I'm trying to figure out where to go because we got problems on both ends. And what I did is I was walking out, I looked over and saw Jordan, and Jordan was on one knee, and Hunter Lawrence was on one knee, and they were praying. And I'll never, ever forget it. I looked over and said, "Jordan and God have got that handled. I'm going to the offensive line." And that's what we did, and that's the reason it ended up working for us in the end. What we did when it didn't work last year, it goes back to your roots. I've always been told if it's not working, change it. Change it. You got to fix it. Hard decisions for all of us. There's no different in your business, no different in your family. If things aren't working, you have to make some hard decisions. You got to talk to some folks, and you got to be direct with them. And our staff was so professional, they understood at the University of Texas you can't be 5 and 7. That was understood across the board, and our coaches were great, and they handled it really, really well. So we've gone out, we've hired some new coaches that are a lot of fun. At this point, everybody likes them. They're undefeated. Undefeated's good. And I've told them all, just hang on. Get ready. All those smiles are going to be critics when you start playing, but that's part of the deal at the University of Texas. The players have come up with a little slogan, brick by brick. We need to keep our mouth shut, and we need to go back to work. Because we lost a lot of respect last year. We lost some trust. We didn't communicate very well. And obviously we were splintered, and those BBs were all over the room, and we didn't have a common purpose. And the common purpose is supposed to be about winning at the University of Texas. The common purpose is supposed to be about the young people at the University of Texas. And it's not supposed to get out of that. When you start thinking about what sports really is, it's really a microcosm of life in our society. We all have problems. We have ups and downs. I sat at a round table yesterday with Colt McCoy, Ricky Williams, and Vince Young, and we were with ESPN. And we sat there for 2.5 hours, and what they all started talking about, they asked them questions about their experience. Why'd you come to Texas? What'd you learn? What'd you do? And it was really interesting that all three of them said we felt very prideful when Coach Brown would lean on us in the fourth quarter to win the game. Because you've got to have some guys that have it. And those guys that have it want the ball in their hands. It's the way Jordan Shipley was. He nearly won the Alabama game when we had a young quarterback and throwing it out there. But you start looking at what we've learned from the Coach Woods, what we've learned from guys like my grandfather, what we've learned from Coach Royal, what Coach Shipley and Coach West are teaching today. And it's that life is about family, and our family are our roots. And from our roots come our values. And when you start trying to find your final resting place and you go back, and I can promise you, my mother's with Coach Wood now, they're probably watching this, and both of them have opinions. But as you go to rest, Coach Royal calls it laying down your bucket for the last time. But when we go to heaven, we go to the Lord, it's not going to be about how many wins are next to my name, how many are next to Coach West, how many are next to Coach Shipley. How many are next to Coach Wood? Coach Rowe right now could care less about his 167 wins at the University of Texas. But it is about the lives you touch. It's about the difference that you made in that young guy's life. It's about maybe what you did and you don't even know how subtle it was, because sometimes the biggest change in people's life can be with the smallest gesture that you give them. Maybe it was a pat on the back when they were struggling. Maybe it was you had to chew them out one time when they were doing things wrong, and they come back when they're 40 years old and say, "Thank you, Coach. Thank you. I was headed to the wrong spot. I was headed in the wrong place." That's what you inductees are here for tonight, because that's what Coach Wood gave you. That's why Brownwood is a special place to coach. When Coach Shipley came here, I told him, "Good luck, Coach. You got more pressure than I got. I followed Coach Rowe, you're following Coach Wood, and they're very much alive, and they're standing right there on that sideline now." So you understand that as they look at you. But what you learn is it's a great thing. It's a great thing. Because the standard at Brownwood and the standard at the University of Texas is set very, very high. And you've got to work really, really hard and make sure that you live up to that standard. And that's what we're going to continue to do. I know that's what Bob will do here. I know that's what Glenn will do at Brownwood.